Okay, members. We haven't actually had the fire alarm test yet in the chamber, but it's already past 10, so we're going to make a start. If we suddenly stop talking in the chamber and pause, it's because the fire alarm test has started late, so you might have to bear with us for the next 10 minutes or so, just in case that happens. Bore da pawb ac croeso, good morning, and welcome to this hybrid meeting of the Environment, Regeneration and Street Scene Services Scrutiny Committee on the 4th of March 2025. I'm Councillor Sean Percy. I'll be chairing the meeting today. Before we move on to the next agenda item, just the usual housekeeping. This meeting will be recorded today, and please ensure your phones are switched to silent during the meeting. And for members online on Teams and officers, could you please raise your electronic hand if you wish to speak? And I have two members in the chamber today. We've got Councillor Rob Wood and Councillor Bob Wolford, and they can raise their hands in order to indicate in the chamber. For those who are online, can I just remind members that if you're participating today, that you do have an obligation to be seen and heard when participating in council business. So please have your cameras switched on during the meeting. So for the purposes of declarations, I'd like to confirm that we'll be scrutinising items 4A and 4B from the Cabinet Forward Work Programme and the performance monitoring item 6A. So I'll now move on to agenda item 2. Are there any declarations of interest today?
I see no declarations, Chair.
Thank you. Again, as usual, if you realise you need to make a declaration during the item, please just pop your hand up and we will pick it up then. So I'll now take you on to agenda item 3, which is minutes of the previous meeting. This is on pages 5 to 38 of your agenda pack. So if members feel they're an accurate record, can I have a proposer and a seconder to approve, please?
I'll propose, Chair.
Proposed by Councillor Bob Wolford and seconded by Councillor Robert Wood. Thank you. Members, if you don't indicate to the contrary, I'll take it these minutes are approved.
I see no indications to the contrary, Chair. Therefore, these minutes are approved as accurate.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, so we'll now move on to part 1, item 4. And move to item 4A, which is the electric vehicle on-street home charging item. So that's on pages 13 to 39. I think we might have a slight issue with my page numbers here. Before we go to questions, do officers want to add anything to the report today?
If I may, Chair.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Just to say, obviously members have considered this issue before, and we do have policy in this area. But with the new decarbonisation team that we've got, they're very keen that we are more proactive and get involved. And so hence this report coming back, proposing a minor change that we do engage in a trial if the opportunity arises.
Thank you very much for that. I think that perhaps captures one of the questions from pre-brief, really, which came from myself around how that position has changed from the last report. Because I know members were maybe a little vocal in the previous scrutiny meeting around perhaps our justification for not engaging. So certainly from my point of view, I'm pleased that we are now intending to engage in that trial process. I've got a number of questions from pre-briefing from members, so I'm going to work my way through those now. And I'm going to start with Councillor Rob Wood. Rob.
Thanks, Chair. There's a number of questions that I asked in the pre-brief, but I'm trying to sort of summarise them up, you know, if I can. I mean, what's of concern to me then, I'm not going to go through the whole report because obviously we have seen this before. But, you know, firstly, I'd like to see, you know, before on the recommendations, recommendation B is that the Director of Environment and Regeneration be delegated the authority to agree location and details. I would like to see, as a member of the Scrutiny Committee, a lot more detail of any pilot that goes ahead, because obviously the complications that can arise through the EV charging paper, as it sort of does contradict itself in some ways. You know, if we go for the channeling idea, there's obviously the question of land ownership, whether, you know, how you deal with flats, pavements, you know, that there's so much that lacks detail before we go to that pilot. So I suppose in summary, I'd just like to say I'd like to see a lot more detail of everything, including, you know, I know that you've got a sort of a template for an agreement at the end in one of the appendices, but I feel that that's very vague. And will people in any pilot area, and let's be honest, if there are more electric vehicles coming online, I would have thought that every resident or householder in that area would want to go ahead with a free trial pilot, because even though they may not have electric vehicles now, they may have that in the future. So I'd just like to see this come back then when there is a definitive idea of what's going to be in the trial, what areas are involved, what costs are involved. I'd like to see the report come back then. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Robert. I'm going to go to Bob as well on this one, just before I bring officers back. Because I know, Bob, you had some questions around who might bear the cost and around that element. So I don't know if you want to ask those questions before we come back.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, around the same things. I was wondering if we had actually costed the physical putting channels in and what that will cost and who would bear that cost. My kind of opinion in the pre-brief was most of the houses we're going to be talking about are going to be terraced houses or flats and things like this, where tend to live people on lower incomes. And therefore, if they're going to be bearing the cost, it's going to be an extra cost towards them as residents. I think we need to know at quite an early stage, even with the pilot, before we do the pilot, you know, where those costs are going to come from, where that money is going to come from, and eventually where it's going to be laid, you know.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Mike, did you want to come back on those questions before we continue?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we have been liaising with other councils and looking at what's happening across the UK. But of course, part of having a trial is gaining first-hand experience yourself and being able to answer some of those questions that are being asked. I think it's not envisaged that it would be a large trial. In terms of costs, I mean, costs would normally be covered by the resident. I note, though, that Blaenau Gwent, for example, are covering the installation costs for a limited number of households on their trial, which this council could consider. And final costs would depend on the solution that was involved in the trial. And for example, the Kerbo charge solution is circa £1,000 per property. So if there were half a dozen properties involved, it would be in that sort of order of £6,000. I understand what's been said about the cost. There is the upside, of course, to investing in having a facility, is that the unit costs are much cheaper to actually charge your vehicle. So at home, you're looking at an overnight rate of, say, 7 pence per kilowatt hour. Whereas if you're out in using sort of commercial charging points, you're talking up to 90 pence per kilowatt hour. So in terms of ongoing charging of your vehicle, there's a big benefit to having a home facility, if you can.
Okay, thank you. Do members want to come back on any of those points before I move on? Rob?
Yes, I mean, obviously you touched on a possibility of it being £1,000 or thereabouts to do the channel, as we know with dropped curbs. If you have a drop curb scheme, some people will participate and they'll pay for the drop curb. Other people tend to use their ingenuity and bypass it anyway. I mean, if people are going to be sort of charged what we would consider a high amount, they might just not bother. And the second point I would make on it is, with petrol and diesel on a national level being eventually phased out anyway, I mean, every house, every property is going to have this. And would it be a sort of a better plan going forward to plan for every house and every eventuality, because in the end, everybody's going to have to be electrical. Plus, there's also the point that if detachable charging is the technology of the future, then a lot of people would recharge in the house. They wouldn't need cable connections. You know, are we sort of building in something that may be obsolescent in the future? Just my thoughts. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. Bob, did you have anything to come back on those questions?
No, fine. You know, obviously, £1,000 per property, it's going to be quite expensive, and if the resident is going to, bear that charge, I can endorse what Rob is saying. Things are moving very quickly, and the time scale is very small. You know, we're talking about 2035 when the government says they want to stop producing petrol and diesel vehicles, and we're only 10 years away from that now. So, but in those 10 years, I do endorse what Rob says. Technology is moving so quickly, we may be in a different position altogether by then.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. It's it is very tricky as to how much how much resource we invest into an unknown future in that sense. I got a few more indications. I'm going to bring Councillor Jeremy Hurley because I think he may have something on this particular point before I move on to other committee members. Councillor Hurley.
Thanks, Chair. And I don't know if Mike is aware as well, is that we were contacted by a local firm. I think I've put the link in the chat, which is Charge Gully, and they were talking about trialing in the Keys. So it wasn't so much a pilot scheme, but just to example their product, because they could sort of find somewhere in the Keys they would have. I think there was no cost impact in that they were going to do it, just as an example. But that might have been done through Nigel Morris, who's the EV infrastructure officer. So perhaps he may know more about it, and Mike may not. So the other thing as regards future proofing, there's consultation going on at Welsh Gov and UK Gov regarding building control and planning, where the possibility is that they consult in on that any new property or any property that goes through a major update or upgrade, it'll be part of the application that EV charging has got to be put in. The only restriction on that is obviously National Grid and the capacity of the grid. And again, on National Grid's front, they are now insisting that when new properties are built, that there's almost a 3-phase supply going into the new properties. So there's a bigger capacity. So there are sort of things in process, forward-thinking things that lots of sort of stakeholders are involved in as well. But there are obviously complications as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy, for the insight there. And yeah, I see you put that link into the chat. I don't know if officers have anything to respond on that particular point.
Just to say, obviously, Nigel and the decarb team, they are one of the driving forces for us getting involved in the trials as well. So, it's not to say that there are various solutions, and the gully one is another one. We could still do that in the depot and see what that's like, and perhaps use one of the other ones on street to get, as I say, this first-hand experience. So the question is really, do we want to be involved in a trial and be able to sort of contribute to the debate, or are we just happy to watch what's happening elsewhere and see what comes forward in terms of national guidance?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on now to Councillor Laura Williams. Laura.
Thank you, Chair. So my first question, if that could be answered first, and then I'll go into the rest of my questions. So can we just get clarification that for the trial, which option that we're looking at? I don't think it's very clear in the paperwork.
Okay.
Yeah, well, we have. We've left it open so that we can. If a particular option is already being trialled substantially, we would like to do something different to contribute to the debate, and that's changing all the time. So we have left it open that we can, as a recommendation as written, change tack if a new option comes on, or if one option is being trialled a lot already, that we can then do something different. So, but the the Kerbo, call it the Kerbo charge, is certainly one of the ones, and also there's a gully one is another one that's.
Could you briefly describe those, options to members, just so we know what you're talking about there. What was?
Yeah, so the gully is literally a channel that goes across the footway. The cable then, and then the cable goes in across and then there's a sort of covering that goes in over the top. The cable goes into the vehicle. It locks into the vehicle. As you know, anyone who's got an electric vehicle knows that it's locked in. So when it's charging, it can't be pulled out and sort of taken by anybody. So that's all secure and charging. And then when the vehicle's charged, you just pull the top out of the channel, pull the cable back out, and then put the top back in. So that's that one. The Curbo charge is actually a rubber sort of curb assembly that you connect into. So they're all sort of similar, slight variations. So the cable would come through to the curb. And there are others. There are sort of charging points that actually click that, pillar type that click in and lock into an assembly in the ground. There's in the pictures you've seen in the background there's these overhead sort of versions that swing out and take the cable above pedestrians, so there's not involved. So there's it's as has been said, the technology and the ideas are changing rapidly. And this question again, do we want to be part of the debate?
Yeah, absolutely. Laura, did you have some follow-up questions?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. So my first one is, we've been given a template form for a licensee. I just wanted some more information around that, whether it was the address or the resident registered, and then would there be any costs when purchasing a house that already has a gully or a system in place to transfer the license? And then my next two questions are there any plans to include this when full resurfacing of pavements take place in the future? And would we be outsourcing the installations, or would we train our existing teams?
Thanks, Laura. Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, we'd certainly, income generation, if there was an opportunity, we do have capital gangs and we could train them and we could set a charge like we do for doing drop curbs, so that we certainly could do that. It would be there'd be someone who'd have to be licensed to do it, so that we knew the standard that they were going to be constructed if it was a company in a contractor in the private sector. In terms of the property, if there is an existing one, the license, it would be offered to be taken over by the new resident. They don't have to do it, but it would be offered to them to take over, so that they would be able to do that.
Okay, great. Laura, are you happy with those responses?
Yeah, so essentially some of those decisions haven't been made yet, but it's something we'd look at in the future, I'm guessing. Just the question around whether we'd look at installing when full resurfaces are done. Was there an answer on that one? I
think this is one of the issues that first-hand experience would be very helpful, and it will add a complication. It won't be as simple as just, say, planing a footway and then replacing it. There will be it will be slightly more engineering complications than that, and that's something that experience will, I'm sure, in the trials elsewhere, or with the trial, sooner or later that will happen, and that experience will be shared, I'm sure, by everybody, and we'll all gain from that experience in terms of what the implications of that are.
Is that okay, Laura?
Yeah, am I okay to ask one more question? Just realised I've missed one off.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Thank you. Once installed and being used by residents, do we know what department or directorate the any issues or upkeep would come under? So whether it be highway, street care, etc. So as councillors, when we do get complaints, do we know which way that would then go? Who do we direct that to?
Yeah, well, the license would be with the council as highway authority, so it would be the highway authority that would be responsible. So it would be well, we'd sort out exactly where that would be in terms of which division that would be. I mean, the director is currently looking at bringing all the highway functions all together, so it would be, and if that goes ahead, it would be that section, so.
Thank you. Okay, I've got Councillor Rob Wood in the chamber. Do you want to come in on this point, Rob?
Yes, and it ties in to a little bit what I said earlier about recommendation B on the papers, in that, the Director of Environment. I represent an area that is nearly, well, it must be over 90%, is semi-detached houses. Now, I would just, I just like to see from the Director of Environment and Regeneration, obviously, if they pick an area, they should pick an area, and I'll just say as an example, Aberavon Ward, whereby you have a bit more of a mixture of modern houses on sort of Bagmoors and the older terrace houses, so that we can see a better picture. I mean, if they pick my ward and it's mainly semi-detached houses, then that's not going to reflect properly on the issues that we could get in the future through a trial. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Robbie. I think that would defeat the object. I'm sure the trial will probably be focused on those maybe more challenging areas. I don't know if officers want to come back on that.
Yeah, I think we have an existing mailbag, and we've got an existing request that have been refused, and so we'd probably start off by looking at those and seeing if there was a particular sort of trial that came out of those existing refusals.
I think, yeah, that sounds like quite a sensible place to start. Okay, I've got a few indications. I'm going to call back in Councillor Hurley, and then I'm going to move back to our committee list. So, Councillor Jeremy Hurley.
Thanks, Chair. No, it was just one other added option I think that we got offered by a sort of third-party franchise, and Mike, you probably know about this, was the connection to the lighting system on the street lights. But again, it's a really complicated system, and I think they were charging more per unit because obviously they wanted to make money out of it. There was not as much cost in installation, but I can understand a really complicated system then, in that you've got to assess all the lighting infrastructure as well. So it was just another option that was considered or might be under consideration. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. And perhaps I'll just ask a question for clarity here. Obviously, the report we've got is in relation to on-street home charging. Is the extent of this trial going to be charging solutions directly connected to the resident's property, or are we going to look at other on-street charging options, e.g. us putting our own pillar in and having some sort of recharging mechanism? I think that'll be a useful point of clarity, actually, in terms of what the scope of the trial is.
Well, a couple of things. Just street lighting. Obviously, all our street lights are at the back of the footway. So if you did connect to the street lights, you'd have the same problem of the cable trailing the footways. So that solution doesn't help us in terms of getting the connections across the footway. This home charging is about the connection being to the property. The council is looking at a wider strategy. That's the zero emissions vehicle infrastructure strategy. That has come here before, about a year ago, perhaps. And that sort of sets out what the council is doing on that. And that's being led by, I said, the decarb team in Simon Brennan's division.
Dave, did you want to come in on this?
Yeah, I suppose the other thing, Chair, to bear in mind is obviously if people won't have designated parking spaces on street. So you may have some residents that have already got either an IDPP or that are residents only parking in place. So there'll be there will be some impacts, I think, if we were designating charge points on street. How that's enforced, how it's regulated, is another factor that needs to be borne in mind when considering the charging infrastructure.
Thanks, Dave. Some good points there. I'm going to bring in Councillor Rosalind Davis next.
Regarding the estimated cost of £1,000 per property, would they be able to pay by instalments if they can't pay the £1,000?
Good question, and I guess that's partly why it was handy for the director to have a certain amount of delegated authority in relation to the trial, so that we can react to issues that we don't even know about yet because we've never been involved in it. So and as I say, if we were looking, for example, at the existing requests that have been refused, and where they are, and and that leads us into a particular place. Again, that's why it's handy to have the delegated authority, that we can follow those sort of data and see where it takes us.
Okay, is that all right, Ros?
Yes, but hopefully that they will be able to pay by instalments if they can't pay the £1,000 straight ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure that point's been noted. Okay, are there any other members that have any questions on this item? I know we had a few others noted down, but I think some of those points may have been answered during the course of discussion. Has anyone else got any points to raise, Bob?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The only other thing I brought up in the pre-brief was security. We know there's a lot of cable theft goes on in the area on railway lines and other facilities, and we're going to be laying cables across footpaths. And most of the charging will probably be done overnight, so it gives obviously people a really good opportunity to steal these things. Have we looked at that kind of issue? Obviously, I would hope it would be looked at in as part of the trial, but have we thought about that before we go into the trial?
Thanks, Bob. Mike?
Yeah, just as I say, the cables do lock into the vehicles when they're charging. So I think one is they shouldn't be left in situ when the vehicles are not charging. So it's up to the resident to take the cable back, so it's not there as a sort of an attraction. But when it's charging, it's locked into the vehicle. I certainly wouldn't like to start cutting through a cable that was actually charging at however many kilowatts. Doesn't sound like a good idea to me. But again, the trials elsewhere, and if we get involved in one, will give us first-hand experience.
Okay, I think you may be underestimating the level of risk some of these cable thieves will go to. When they target electrical substations and power stations, a car charger is probably the least of their worries. Bob?
Yeah, no, I was just going to come back on just what you said there, Sean. These people are reckless, and they'll put an axe through a cable. Well, it's live, as good as look at it. They don't really care. So I understand. I wouldn't do it. You probably wouldn't do it, Mike. But there are certainly people out there that will do it.
Okay, thanks, Bob. I've got an indication from Councillor Helen Kerry-Clark, and then I'm going to just try and draw some of the discussion together and perhaps put forward an extra recommendation onto this item as well. Helen?
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, I mean, I've got issues in my ward with people trailing cables all over the place at the moment. So I welcome this, but I think, what are we doing about areas that have got cables trailing all over the place and are a risk to disabled people and trailing across the thing in the dark? I think there needs to be a sort of carrot and stick approach as well, because a lot of people will just say, oh, well, there's no problem, I'm not paying the £1,000. But we're allowing people to do it anyway at the moment. So what are we doing to address that issue? I know it's not in the paper, but I'm just interested to know.
No, thanks, Anne. I think that's a really relevant question, actually. And I'd question whether we've got an accurate reporting mechanism to capture that as well. So I don't know what officers' views are on this, but I'd be surprised if we've got a good picture of where this is happening across the county data-wise. It might be useful for us to have as part of this trial, in terms of, we've got people that want to put a solution in. Actually, maybe we should also approach some people and see how that goes, who are trailing cables on a regular basis as well. Mike?
I think where we're at the moment is responding to complaints. So if there are complaints, we'll go out and deal with them. In terms of proactively surveying streets, looking for cables, we're not doing that at the moment. So yes, we don't have data on it.
So just for members who couldn't hear, Dave's just sort of asking the question: do we have enforcement powers over this?
Yeah, we do on trailing cattle. Yes, we do. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the clarity. I think my point was perhaps less around us surveying streets, but more around, for example, on the online reporting tools we've got, having a specific option for people to say there is a trailing EV charging cable in this location. Just might be helpful for us to gather that data without necessarily having to do a survey. Understanding the extent of the problem, I think, is always useful, isn't it? Helen, did you want to come back on those responses?
No, that's fine. Thank you. That's. I'm glad to know we can get it enforced. I will be in touch shortly.
Brilliant. Okay, no problem. And I've got Councillor Hurley again. Do you want to come back in before I pull this discussion together?
Thanks, Chair. It was only one last item in that the incentive might be, I think most of the trailing cables are where they're using the supplied car charger, which is only 3 kilowatt, which can be plugged into a domestic socket. So you see external extension cables, then that's plugged in. The incentive is if they have a properly installed EV charger, it's then 8 kilowatt or possibly 11 kilowatt if they got capacity. So the benefit is obviously they can charge quicker. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, James. That's a fair point. Okay, so I think I suppose the sense I've got from the discussion here is that members are supportive of the principle of a trial taking place. I know it's certainly my view, and I see a few nods, and I think members are supportive of the recommendations in that sense. I think the only thing I'd say is that it feels like members are quite keen to see more information on how a trial would work and what the shape of that trial would be. And perhaps in that vein, I might suggest that we maybe add a recommendation that when the details of a trial are worked up, that they come back to Scrutiny Committee prior to implementation. So that's probably what I would suggest as an additional recommendation. So perhaps we've got an opportunity to scrutinise the detail of the trial, the scope, the location, and make sure we're getting everything out to that trial. Councillor Robert Wood.
Yes, Chair. I was thinking possibility that recommendation B could be added to the word in there at the end, and that further research can be done into this and a full report on the trial area and probable costs come back to the committee.
Okay, let me just have a quick chat with Democratic Services and officers just to look at the wording just to make sure we get that right. So bear with me a second, member. Right. Okay. Thanks, members, for bearing with us there. Just having a little discussion how best to get this this word in. Yeah, I think what I'll propose we do is add an additional recommendation. So Tom has rightly pointed out, of course, as a scrutiny committee, we can request reports at any point in time, but I think it might help if we've formally requested it as part of this discussion. So we've got recommendations A, B, and C. I would propose that we add an additional recommendation D, which is that prior to the implementation of a trial, the details of the trial are brought to the Environment Scrutiny Committee. Does that sound okay, Tom?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm happy to propose that. Any members happy to second that?
Chair, can I just come in and say perhaps we should add on probable costs just to get an idea of the finance situation on it as well?
Well, I think we could add to my if I'm honest, I'd say that the report coming back on the trial would include that. But if we want to make it explicitly clear, that's fine. I don't mind saying that prior to the implementation of a trial, that a report on the details of the trial, including costs, comes to the scrutiny committee. Yeah, I'm happy for that to be the wording if that provides members some comfort.
Shall we write the word in? Or just propose?
Yeah, Tom's just going to write the wording down and pop that in the chat, and then we'll do the proposal and seconding. Yeah, okay. Okay, members. These these amendments always end up taking far longer than they should do, considering they're relatively straightforward. But got to make sure we get the process correct. So Tom's just popped some text in the chat. So I'm just going to take us through the procedure, which is to draw members' attention to the recommendations, which are on page 23 of our report today. So I first need a proposer and a seconder for the recommendations as existing, and then we'll bring in the amendment and take a vote then. So can I have a proposer on the recommendations?
I'll propose, Chair.
Councillor Rob Wilford and seconded by Councillor Rob Wood. So Tom.
Thank you, Chair. So I understand, obviously, through the discussions we just had, that members wanted to add an additional amendment. So as you'll have seen, that's in the chat now, but I'll just read it out for clarity. So prior to the implementation of a pilot, a report including location details and cost is brought to the Environment, Regeneration and Street Scene Services Committee for scrutiny. So that's the amendment members have referred to. So the first part of the process now would be to get a proposer for this amendment.
Councillor Rob Wood.
I propose, Chair.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Bob Wilford in the chamber as well.
Excellent, thank you. So now we have a validly proposed amendment. So we now need to have a vote on the amendment itself. So can I just firstly ask members if there are any members who wish to abstain from this vote? I don't see any. Could I also now ask for members who wish to vote for the amendment to either raise your electronic hands if you're at home, or if you're in the chamber to please put your hand up. So this is a vote for the amendment. Give me a second. Excellent, there we go. And can I just get the members who are voting against as well, please? So just to check that Councillor Jeff Jones, that's a vote against. Was there anyone else that voted against as well? Sorry. No, so it's 1 against. That's fine. Okay. That amendment has therefore passed. So this now means we now need to vote on the substantive recommendation. So the substantive recommendations in front of us, that includes now the amendment as well. So if I just hand you back to the chair to do the full vote.
Okay, thanks, Tom, for walking us through that. So, yeah, as Tom's just said, we'll now take a vote on the recommendations, including the additional recommendation that we've just agreed. So I need to propose in a seconder for that, please.
I move, Chair.
Proposed by Councillor Rob Wood and seconded by Councillor Bob Wilford in the chamber. Thank you, Bob. So, members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, I'll take it that this recommendation is approved.
I see no indication to the contrary, Chair. Therefore, the recommendations have been approved.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll now move on to item 4B, which is the fleet and heavy plant renewals document on pages, it says 41 to 62, but I'm not sure if I've got my page numbers correct.
I think it is right.
It is correct. Wonderful,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Before I go to questions, do officers have anything to add to this report? Dave?
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to make members aware of the Scrutiny Committee, we've withdrawn this paper from Cabinet at the moment, primarily in relation to paragraph 18 around the financial impacts. We've identified highways and drainage renewal shortfalls and ongoing revenue pressures, and similarly in the Parks and Neighbourhood Service. But so that we've got a holistic report, we're going to cover off some of the other areas as well. So that's the primary reason for holding the report. What I can advise members is that we have done a high-level costed model up until 2032. So we've got an 8 to 10 year costed model for renewals, with the intention of that being utilised by our finance colleagues to inform the medium-term financial plan. So we've done a lot of work around that. Once we've done this extra piece of work, we're going to refine the next 3 years of costings. Because the costs are so volatile at the moment in the market, and different vehicles are coming online, obviously the high-level 10-year cost is going to change. So, as I say, we're going to refine it down and fine-tune those costs for the next 3 years. So that's the rationale why we've withdrawn the report. As explained, obviously, we're happy to come and discuss the report here, and you will see that further report in due course.
Thanks, Dave, for the introduction there. And I did sort of briefly explain in pre-briefing that the report had been withdrawn from Cabinet, though you've gone into a bit more detail there, which I do appreciate for members as to why. And the reason I thought it was still important to bring it is we've got some quite specific and detailed information in terms of the vehicles that have been looked at in the scope of this report, and it's usually quite an interesting discussion point for members. So I did feel it was still useful for us to have that discussion on those particular items, particularly understanding why certain replacements have been chosen or not chosen. So in that vein, that's why we've looked at the report today, but I do appreciate your time coming here, considering the report's going to be, I suppose, revised and brought back. So I'm going to go straight into questions from members now, and my first one is from Councillor Bob Wilford. Bob.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question was, with the replacement of these vehicles and, pardon me, linking it to the last item, this timescale of 2025, 2035, when the government want to stop producing diesel and petrol vehicles, are we looking at trying to align replacements with that so that we don't kind of buy something that then is not going to be in place or in the right place at the right time?
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, sure. So we are trying to align ourselves with the Welsh Government targets. you'll probably be aware that in England, they've already changed those targets, and I think they pushed them to 2035 and beyond. For Wales, it's currently 2030 where we're supposed to transition to zero emission vehicles. But we've got a target as well for 2025 where we have to do our small and light vans. And we are on track for the renewal of those. Some of the challenges we face at the moment around the renewals program, and this might be covered by another question, but we are tending to replace these vehicles based around the warranty of the batteries, which vary between 5 and 8 years. I think as time evolves, there may be changes in how vehicles are purchased or leased, or the batteries may be leased and replaced. So things, I think, will change over time. And then just to highlight some of the other sort of fleet purchases, sweepers are purchased over a 5-year period, and that's predominantly because of their harsh use, and there are some reliability issues with the electric sweepers that we've experienced. And then generally refuse and recycling vehicles are replaced over 7 years unless it's electric, in which case we have 8 years in line with the battery warranty. All other vehicles are replaced over a 9-year period. All vehicles used to be replaced up until 2014 on a lifespan of 7 years. But at that time, there was, again, a financial pressure and a review, and it was decided that vehicles would be run on for the extra 2 years, but also recognizing that those vehicles then require more maintenance and more repairs as parts fail. So that's where we are in terms of those sort of renewable periods. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. But did you have anything to come back on that, Bob?
Just to say, it's great. It's good to see that it's being considered, and that obviously those timelines. I don't know whether the Welsh timeline will change in line with the UK one. It's quite probable it will. But yeah, just so that we're not kind of purchasing or leasing or engaging vehicles that then are going to be out of service before their life is up. Yeah.
That's right. As I say, I'm not sure. I think Welsh Government is still committed to trying to deliver against those targets. There's a big drive, excuse the pun, in terms of moving to zero emission vehicles. And of course, the other aspect is how quickly we can move to a hydrogen fueling infrastructure and hydrogen vehicles for the larger HGVs, like the refuse freighters in particular.
Okay, thank you. Is that okay, Bob? Great. Okay, I'm just going to come in with perhaps a more general question for a moment. Obviously, you mentioned we've had a bit of talk around, I suppose, the targets and the decarbonisation programme locally and nationally. Are we finding in transitioning to electric vehicles locally that there's been other knock-on benefits, e.g., are we saving money on fuel, or are we finding that the cost of charging has been difficult? So I'm just trying to think, actually, regardless, for example, if the national priorities or targets changed, is there still a rationale locally for us to transition from an operational cost point of view?
So setting aside the actual infrastructure costs, and we've invested heavily as a council in putting the charging facilities in, there's clearly a reduction in costs in terms of fuel vis-a-vis electrics. I don't know the amounts or the percentages, but I've got Kevin, our fleet manager, online that may know a little bit more detail around that because he handles the recharging for the fuel versus electric. So, Kevin, I don't know if you're able to step in and answer that.
Yeah, thanks, Dave, and thanks, Chair. Yeah, we've obviously making savings. I don't think them savings are what they should have been when we originally looked at transitioning vehicles, because obviously electric costs have gone up. However, as they come down against fuel, yes, there'll be significant savings. But what we're experiencing with the lighter vans, the actual cost of the vehicle has dropped significantly. They've dropped from something like 28,000, for example, for a light van, down to around about 21,000 now. And that's simply because there's not a very good residual market in electric vans at the moment. So, but when we're looking at the heavier fleet, I think we will struggle to recover the costs of the difference between a diesel and electric, simply because they are quite expensive because they need a lot more battery power. So the good thing is, so like and Mike will agree, is that there's a large solar array as well. When we go with the refuse recycling vehicles, and we can utilize that down at the quays, which would make it even cheaper. So, but yeah, it's a little bit of both at the moment. I think as the market changes and gets better, I think then prices will, and we started to see them prices for heavy goods come down as well. But yeah, I haven't got the specifics, but it is a cost analysis I can do.
Thanks, Kevin, for that. I think it is quite important, because I think these issues often get sort of drawn into sort of a big political, often culture war-y debate over whether net zero or decarbonisation is a worthy cause. It's one that I feel is, but some people don't believe that. And I think it is often useful for us to make the case just from an operational, practical point of view. If we are making savings, and there's other benefits, of course, local air quality is another, particularly notable example for recycling vehicles. As one example, where those are trundling up and down the county every day of the week. So we're making impacts there as well. I think it would be interesting to get a little bit of a report to understand what the positive benefits have been of this programme, other than contributing to the wider decarbonisation agenda. And I just think that might be a useful thing for the council to do as an exercise generally, because I certainly I've seen some comments from residents that are going, oh well, the council go around all these brand new electric vehicles, and actually, well, particularly those light vans as you talk about, they are becoming cheaper now. They're quieter, there's less pollution, they're cheap to run, and if we're putting solar arrays in, as we are now down in the what was the MREC, that's going to give us some really good opportunities to offset costs. So maybe that's just a piece of work that might just be useful to be done. I think certainly from a comms point of view, and just from a point of view of explaining to our residents the rationale as to why we're making some of these decisions. Okay, a couple of questions from me as well, other than those rambling observations. I'm a bit curious, really, in terms of some of the challenges we've had in replacing some vehicles, and sweepers were mentioned, and reliability and range were mentioned. I'd be interested to understand a bit more about those problems. And I know we've discussed before, geographically in Neath, Talbot, it's challenging for us. We've got valley communities, we've got some areas quite significant distances away from depots, and how we manage vehicles that might have a lower range. And I was just wondering, from that point, from the range point, whether we've invested in any infrastructure, for example, in outlying communities to allow charging, and whether we've been looking at the problem in that way, because obviously there's trying to fit electric vehicles into our current working practices and current setup, and then there's the option of altering our working practices and altering our setup to accommodate those vehicles as well. So I'd be interested to kind of understand if there is work going on in that regard, and particularly, for example, the sweepers feel like an obvious one. They're quite a small vehicle. On the face of it, it seems like a good candidate to be an electric vehicle. So I would appreciate any feedback and insight from officers on those points.
Thanks, Chair. So I think there have been obviously pilots and trials of various vehicles, and I'll call upon Kevin to give some examples of the range challenges and reliability issues. We sort of got over a number of those. But what I would say is we've got depot charge points capable of charging all of our vehicles now across 3 depots. So we've got Tower Terrace, which will cover the Swansea Valley, and we've got them, a very large EV infrastructure charging hub at the Keys, at the SRC, and Mike has done a really big EV infrastructure as part of the move down to the recycling centre on Fabian Way. So we've got pretty good charge facilities, and we've got rapid charge facilities as well. So they can charge their vehicles up to, say, 80% in perhaps 20 to 30 minutes on a stop. One of the wider things that we've been looking at for the smaller sized vehicles was part of more of a corporate strategy, really, in that we know that there are reviews going on as to where key hubs are going to be located around the county, whether or not those hubs should have EV infrastructure that will allow all council staff that use the fleet. So if it's a teacher or a social worker that needs to charge locally at a hub, potentially at the school, they're able to access those facilities, and we're any sort of back office software that we're putting in will allow them to scan a fob to enable them to do that. So we're mindful of trying to achieve that flexibility for all users of the fleet right across the authority. So I don't know if Kevin, if you want to give some examples around the sweepers. We've talked about the payload as well on the small vans. Some of them, because our building services and street care operatives carry a lot of kit with them. The plumbing teams, the electricians, they got all the tools and equipment. That has been having some impact on the range of the vehicles as well. So, but Kevin can expand on that future.
Thanks, Dave. Kevin?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Some issues we've experienced. I think the range is pretty good on most of the vehicles, if I'm honest with you, within Neath Talbot area. But I think most of the kind of challenges really are around the charging infrastructure, making sure it works with the vehicle. We're often buying vehicles and then, plugging them into a charge point, whereas the sweeper that we've currently got on, which is a 16-ton sweeper, when it's out, it covers the range and it works well. However, the challenges we've got then is when it's knocking off charging, and then we're coming in the morning and we can't use the vehicle then because it's knocked off halfway through the night, kind of thing. So we're trying to work through those kind of challenges as well. But also as well, I mean, with kind of some of the sweepers, I think Swansea Council have got a lot of the more pedestrian sweepers, and they've been having similar issues with the charging. The range is a little bit less on them as well, so they probably would need some charging infrastructure out in the community. I'm awaiting a trial on one of the pedestrian sweepers now before we look at purchasing anything. So at least we can put it through its paces as well and out in the community and see exactly what the range does. But the 16-ton sweeper, the range is pretty good. Lot of like the heavier vehicles, even the lighter vans, we haven't got that much of an issue with range within the authority.
Okay, Kevin, thank you. That I think that's some useful insight there, actually. I'm going to call in Councillor Jeremy Hurley now. Jeremy?
Oh, thanks, Chair. It was just to expand on the information that David had given about, obviously, the cross within the borough. But I know that the CJC Sub Energy Group are also doing a similar look at cross authority, and also obviously cross with the NHS, fire and police of shared facilities, and a similar system, as Dave mentioned, software running in the background. So there are more options for charging that can be charged back. So it's more practical as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. Right, are there any other indications from members on this item? Laura?
Thank you, Chair. It's just an ask. If this paper is coming back to us, can we look at having an extra column on the paperwork of the expected lifespan of the vehicles? I know we've spoken about it, but sometimes it's really handy to have, if they are varying, it in front of us as well, please.
Okay, thanks, Laura. I'm sure officers can take that back for a future report. Are there any other indications from members? I can't see any. Dave, did you want to just...
No, that's fine. We can add an extra column, and as I say, I think we'll probably add in the wider sort of assessment on the 10-year plan, as well as a document that will show you the financial workings that takes place to do those predictive costs. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. That's great. Okay, members, so this item today, we will just note this report. This item's been deferred for Cabinet, so as and when we get the completed report back, we may be able to make any recommendations on that if we see fit at the time. But today we'll just note the report due to the explanation we've had from Dave. So we'll now move on to item 5, which is items from the Scrutiny Forward Work Programme. So we've got no items from the Forward Work Programme today. Item 6 is performance monitoring. So we do have a performance monitoring item today, which is the Corporate Plan Q3 performance monitoring, which is on pages 63 to 112. And also members will have been sent via email an addendum sheet to fill in some missing information in the original report. That has also been published on ModGov under the Cabinet papers, but not under our meeting papers for today. So I know that was sent to members, I think, yesterday or the day before yesterday, wasn't it, Tom? Yesterday. So hopefully members had a chance to read that. Before I go to questions, do officers want to introduce the report? I'm not sure who's taking it.
I think, Chair, as I say, both relevant corporate directors are unable to be here today. It is a wide-ranging report covering all aspects. Obviously, the heads of service are either here or online, covering all the various areas. So if members would like to go into the questions, I'm sure the relevant head of service can tackle that.
There we are. That's great. I'll go to questions from members then. So I'm going to start with Councillor Rob Wood.
Thanks, Chair. I've got two. The first one surrounds the sparsity, really, if we look at page 110 and 11. And I did see the addendums and that, but still, you know, we read through these reports and some of them are quite long. And then we get to the relevant parts and, you know, there seems to be a lack of information there, you know, perhaps it needed to be postponed a little bit longer or whatever, I'm not sure. My other question is related to the coastal path, which does not get a mention on here. And on page 19 of the report, it says that public rights of ways are all on track. And as we've seen, you know, in various meetings of the Scrutiny Committee, we're way behind with the coastal path. And, you know, I'm very disappointed to see that there's no mention of it. And that, you know, when it comes to the item on page 19, which is about the public rights of way, there is no mention of the coastal path. And I think that should have been in there. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. I'm not sure who wants to pick up the point on the coastal path.
Or... I can
Kerry's online. Wonderful. Kerry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I suppose the first point to clarify for members is the Wales Coast Path isn't a right of way, a public right of way as defined in law. It is essentially a permissive path which enables people to sort of walk and cycle along. So, as I said, the report sort of focuses in on sort of the public rights of way, and those 3 bullet points there are just some examples of the work that's been conducted across the public rights of way network over the course of the reporting year. So that's the simple answer to the question that's been raised. I will certainly take back and perhaps in the reports to follow, the quarterly reports to follow, we can make some reference of the Wales Coast Path and progress in that respect. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Kerry. Rob, do you have anything to come back on that?
No. As long as it's noted that, I think it should be included, because it is a very well used path, or the lack of it now means that it's not a very well used path. So, I just think mention needed to be made of it. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, so I also had an indication from Councillor Ros Davis in relation to bus shelters.
Yes, I'm just wondering, what is the criteria for bus shelter replacements?
Thanks, Ros. And this is in relation to there's an item around the bus shelter replacement programme, which is in the report.
Yeah, I mean, mainly condition. We've got a current programme of 40 replacements. 38 are done, 2 left to be done this month, and that's from the clean up, green up programme, or the additional works programme as that funding came under, which went to members in December 22. So it's the end of all of that programme. And there's one other bus shelter that is being replaced and moved as part of safety for pedestrians. So that's where we are with bus shelters at the moment in terms of the current programme. And but it's primarily condition, but there have been, some sites have been in a position for a very long time. The sort of road conditions, things change. And health and safety standards have changed, and we find that some of the alighting points now aren't as good as they need to be, or there's been issues, and we need to look at moving them. But it's mainly condition.
Okay, thank you. Ros, did you have anything to come back on that one?
Well, it can't be in a worse condition than one of the shelters in my ward, and I've been trying for well over 10 years to have a replacement. So I'm hoping that it will be done in the next round, if possible, hopefully. Diolch.
Thanks, Ros. Perhaps it'd be worth you sending the details of that through to officers again.
I have.
Fantastic.
Again.
Dave, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just to add, Jen, I'm not sure if you'll be aware from the Corporate Joint Committee, there are plans as part of the regional transport plan to upgrade infrastructure on all of the bus network. So there is a sort of regional review taking place, which will be linked with bus franchising, where the intention is to upgrade not just in Neath Talbot, but across the region, the standard of the infrastructure and access to those bus shelters. So drop curbs along route to make sure that people can have easy and accessible routes to those bus stops. And just to add, we across the region, there is also a programme now of implementing real-time passenger information, and some members will have seen on parts of the strategic network that some works are being done at present, predominantly quick wins where there is already power supplies to the bus shelters. But the intention is, again, as part of a regional grant-aided programme, that will be rolled out across the region, and you will see in years to come, in next year and the year after, improvements to the infrastructure on street to accommodate that as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Dave. And yeah, I remember looking at that in the sort of CJC programme, and I think the only thing for members, I suppose, to be aware of and to take note of is that, you know, historically perhaps lots of these grant schemes have been focused on strategic corridors, haven't they, and at the expense then of perhaps valley communities or secondary bus routes. And I think that's maybe where we need to think about looking at the overall programme. What's the grant funding and the regional work going to cover, and what do we need to cover with our works programme? So perhaps going forward, just need to make sure we align that so that we don't end up with you know, poor bus shelters at the top of the valley and lovely shiny ones in Sandfields with real-time bus information, which I think we are having at the moment. Okay, I've got a question myself just in relation to the performance monitoring, and it comes back to the right of way point, but active travel is mixed in with that. And I do wonder, now we have an active travel delivery plan, whether the performance monitoring of that item should be aligned to the delivery plan in a more explicit way than it currently is. Because obviously we've sort of marked things are on track, and there is activity ongoing, which is great. But I'm not sure it really references the delivery plan, and I think that just is an observation from me. But you know, the scrutiny committee were quite you know, vocal and instrumental in ensuring the delivery plan was in place to track progress. So I just think we need to make sure that performance monitoring ties back to the objectives in that plan. The additional report we did have does reference some of the items that are within the delivery plan, but I just think it needs to be clearer, I think, for people to track that. Do you want to come in?
Well, that's a good point. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say about going forward. Obviously, over the last year, we've had a significant amount of strategies and plans approved. And there's something we're going to be looking at in our business planning going forward to make sure that we're monitoring when there's annual reports coming forward, so that we're not duplicating our efforts in the corporate plan monitoring and then any other monitoring of strategies and plans. So I hope that answers part of your question.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, it can be challenging for members sometimes to kind of keep abreast of everything. And yeah, sometimes it is our fault. We can be the ones pushing for plans and strategies, and then yeah, the things are spread out sort of all over the place. Dave, did you have anything to add?
It's the point that was made. We've got two plans that are monitored annual, obviously the active travel mapping that's monitored, and then the delivery plan. But I think we can perhaps be smart around how we report around the sort of targets and the delivery. Maybe we'll give that some thought about how that can be reflected, perhaps, Lou, in the corporate plan.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that. Are there any other questions from members? Can't see any indications. Okay, so members, this item is for monitoring, therefore we note the report.
Sorry, Dave. I was just going to mention, perhaps, and I think there was reference to gaps within the report. What we find is that a number of the items are reported on our annual performance data. So I think that probably causes some of the gaps that have been referred to within the report. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I will just come in on that just briefly. I mean, there was some criticism from members in the pre-briefing, and quite rightly so, I think, in terms of some of the gaps that were in the report. And, you know, some of those have now been addressed in this sort of addendum document, but obviously not an ideal way to have that information. And you know, some of it related to spending on a particular scheme. Now, we should be at any point in time able to pull that information out. Have we delivered on a particular scheme? So I think, you know, members made that point in pre-brief, and you know, Councillor Wood sort of touched on it at the start as well. I'm sure that'll be taken back, but I do appreciate the challenges of having quarterly reports with annual metrics. But there are other gaps that do sort of appear. I suppose it is, you're reliant in pulling together information from lots of lots of heads of service and directors, I'm assuming, is the challenge.
Yeah, that is the challenge, Chair. I think also as well, we were mindful that for quarter one and quarter two, when we brought it to Cabinet and Scrutiny, members were sort of conscious it was a very long document. And I think what officers felt was if nothing significant had happened in that period, that it wasn't sort of reflecting what had already been reported previously, there was no further update. So it's not that there was no work ongoing, it was just there was no significant update to note. And we were just repeating ourselves. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fair observation. Right, then I will just move on then. So as I said, this item is for monitoring, so we note the report. And I'll move on to part 4, which is item 7, selection of items for future scrutiny. So this is in relation to our forward work programme and the Cabinet forward work programme. Tom, do you have any items to report to members on this one?
I obviously updated members in pre-briefing about some of the changes, but as it stands, the forward work programme, as you see it, is correct. I just wanted to give you a brief update on 3 things that members have sort of requested, both in pre-brief and I picked up doing the minutes from the meeting I missed, another request members have made. So I'm just chasing up at the moment the options for updates on Burrows Yard, Four Winds, and also on the lighting trials. So Burrows Yard and Four Winds, I'm having chats with officers at the moment about best way to update you all. In regards to the lighting trial, officers are undertaking the question, they're pulling together all the questionnaire information, but I think there's been a bit of an issue where IT were going to assist with that, but they've not got the capacity, so it's just ongoing, and officers are doing that work now. But they will let me know as soon as it's going to come back to committee, so I'll be able to add that to the forward work programme and let you know when. But I am working on all that in the background for you.
Okay, thanks, Tom. And those items will be programmed in then in due course, as and when we can get that information together. Do any other members have any points to raise on the forward work programme specifically? Okay, again, as always, members at any point, just do give me a call or an email and we can have a chat about any items you wish to bring to the committee. So I'll now move on to item 8, which is urgent items. I have no urgent items, but I do have one thing I do want to draw everyone's attention to, which is today is likely to be, unless the forward work programme does change, Dave Griffiths' last scrutiny meeting with us, as he is due to retire next month. So apologies to put you on the spot there, Dave, but you've been quite an important head of service for this committee for a long period of time. I've spent many hours in this chamber with you. So I think it would be remiss of us not to just sort of mark the occasion and offer our thanks for your contribution to the committee and the council. So I just wanted to make that point and wish you well in your retirement. I don't know if any other members have anything else they wish to add, but just give members an opportunity to do that if they wish. Councillor Wood.
Yes, Dave, I'd like to wish you all the best for the future. I found you an excellent officer and head of service when myself and the late Councillor Penry were on the committee, and we found you to be most courteous and informative and never shy away from answering the questions. So, I'd like to wish you all the best for the future. Thanks.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, we've had one of the older councillors giving his thanks, so we'll have one of the younger ones as well. In time, not in age. Yeah, we've had a lot to do with each other since I've been here, Dave, and thank you for all your help. And I think it's the department's been run very well, and it's been a pleasure to work with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Councillor Dacey.
Thanks. Yeah, Dave, I've a long and happy retirement. You've always been very helpful anytime I've contacted you or seen you in person. Hopefully we'll bump into each other at a cricket match and share a beer during the nicer weather that's coming now. All the best, Dave.
Thanks, Andrew. Ros?
Yes, David, I'd like to thank you very much for all the hard work, and sorry for all the work that you've had to do in my ward. It's not been easy, but I thank you very much for all the work and the assistance you've given me personally. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thanks, Ros. There are a few messages on Teams as well from other members, just for information. Dave.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for all your very kind words, members. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honour, and I've thoroughly enjoyed my time over the last 35 years with the council. And I wish the scrutiny panel every success going forward, and of course the council. The scrutiny process is really important. It really does make a difference and does form sort of enhanced policies to the benefit of all the communities. So I wish you every success in the future. Keep up the good work, and hopefully I'll bump into you outside of council settings and see you then. So thank you again for all your kind words. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. I'm sure you'll be following the work of the committee on YouTube when you have a quiet moment with a cup of tea. Okay, on that note, then I'll draw the meeting to a close. Diolch yn fawr. Thanks everyone for your contributions today.
Diolch.
Diolch yn fawr.